Scrolling through Twitter and then seeing a link to a podcast is not a realistic conversion. I don't know anyone who's going to just be scrolling through news and say, I'm going to go listen to an hour and a half podcast right now. So don't think of it as a marketing tool for your podcast in terms of actual conversion. Just have the best Twitter presence possible. Have the best YouTube presence possible. Don't necessarily play that game, play the titling and SEO game.
Hey, it looks like we played that game pretty well because you found us. I know you're not here to listen to me, so I'll keep this brief. But if you missed it, we took this podcast live a couple weeks back. It was the Storyteller Experience. We're going to be doing that more and more often. It was so much fun. But on that one, we had 10 incredible storytellers share their stories and the stories that they're telling. If you missed it, there is no need to worry because we're bringing you each interview over the next several weeks. And then at the end of it all, we're breaking into a new season of Storyteller. It is the same show with a new flow. You're not going to want to miss it. But today, we shoot it straight with Elijah Cohn, Director of Digital Content for Crooked Media. And be prepared to pause and rewind because Elijah is in the know and he drops knowledge. You're going to need to hear it and then hear it again. Have a listen. Hello and welcome to the Storyteller Experience. This has been a long time coming. I am stoked to be here. I am stoked that you are here to listen, to engage, to interact over the next 3 days of great storytelling. But let's start by introducing ourselves. My name is Sky Muller.
And I'm Christine Chalk, and mark my words, we are quite literally the least important people you'll hear from today. I mean it. We've got an absolutely stacked roster of some of the best storytellers out there.
Fresh off inauguration coverage, Elijah Cohn, Director of Digital Content for Crooked Media.
Now, if you're not familiar with Crooked, it's the political media company. It was founded back in 2017 by 3 of President Obama's former top staffers. You may have heard of their flagship podcast, Pod Save America. Elijah, you are employee number 5. Thanks so much for joining us today on Storytell, Elijah.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Sky. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your story before we get into the Crooked Media stuff there, Elijah. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so the Crooked Media story is a little bit of a fun startup story. So I was working at Fox Sports for our next guest, Michael Buckland, in 2016. And I was a producer and editor on the digital side. And I had spent a big chunk of the 2016 election, unfortunately, in a hospital room watching my mom get chemotherapy. And when the election happened, I was pretty shocked by that result, but I still wasn't like a very political person. I just naturally started to pay more attention to politics after that. And then in the summer of 2017, the Trump administration tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And I remember just like working on sports coverage every day. And it was like a dream job when I was a kid, but like my heart was just not in it anymore. And it just happened at that point that someone that I used to work with at a company called Maker Studios reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in coming on to work on this show, Pod Save America, that I'd never heard of before, and help launch this company called Crooked Media. And so I went in, met the hosts, John Favreau, Tommy Vitor, and John Lovett, and they asked me, you know, what do you know about politics? And I said, nothing. But I know I don't like what's going on right now, and I know how to make people who are smart about politics look good and sound good online. So I think I could help you out. And yeah, took a flyer on that job. And my first weekend there was, or my first Monday there was August 17th, 2017, and Charlottesville was August 15th and 16th. And so I just never looked back, felt like it was a good decision. And like you said, I was employee number 5, and now the company has exploded to more than 21 podcasts, over 50 employees, newsletter. Just got one of our podcasts, limited series, adapted for Hulu. So the company's growing in a lot of like very exciting ways, and it's just been a crazy ride.
That is a crazy ride. 5th hire, like you mentioned, now you've got this 21 show portfolio. I've seen you guys just cranking out content, last week's inauguration, the Georgia runoff, the debates. It's been, of course, a huge year for any political company that's working in the media space right now. And I can only imagine what a crazy ride it's been to see the growth of Crooked from start to now. And I know you're gearing up for an even crazier 2021 of content that you're getting ready to push out. What do you think have been the biggest, it's rare that we get to talk to somebody who's been a part of building something like that from scratch. What do you think have been the key learnings that you've taken away from building that digital footprint?
Yeah, sure thing. And I can add a little bit of color here about what the process has been like. So uh, when I started, I was going from the Fox lot, which is like an incredible place to be. It's like I take my family to go see where I work. It was so cool. To the initial Crooked office was in the attic above a comedy club. There was a strip club across the street on one corner. There was a lingerie shop across the street on the other corner. There was a studio that we couldn't use the bathroom during. It was just one studio because the flushing would ruin the audio quality of the podcast. And every morning we'd have to wait for the bong shop beneath us to open their security grate over their window, so that wouldn't mess with the audio either. And so when you're running all of social, all of digital, like so all the strategy, all of the execution for that, you really do zero in on like the things that work. And what I realized and what we realized that we had personalities that people wanted to hear from talking about news cycle events. So we just have to tie those things in together and really lean into that. I have a whole tangent I can go on about trying to get video clips of a podcast and then put them out yourself as one person, but I can skip that for now because I would really also want to shine a light on the work that we do aside from just having those personalities putting out their opinion, which is we have a bunch of political initiatives that we've also leaned into. And I'm not sure that any other company does something quite like this. So in the run up to the 2018 midterms, we launched an initiative called Vote Save America. We're in the hat right here, which, we operate with like no revenue coming in from it. And it's just a way to drive our audience into political initiatives. So say you're looking at a House race in 2018, we would direct our audience to where their donation dollars would go the furthest in terms of ad buys, like in small markets for the House race to flip ads. And so by leaning into that kind of political initiative, which everyone in the company felt really strongly about, it was a way that we could have an incentive for people to follow us outside of the podcast. It was a reason to follow us on Twitter. It was a reason to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, because we would always be able to take the news events that you're seeing on your social media and drive you to be able to do something about it, to take action. So, I mean, I'd say those are the two things. And we can talk about this group thread concept in a little bit, but personality driven opinion around the news cycle and making sure that people weren't just consuming news, but giving them something to do about it really helped us exploit our following outside of our initial success in podcasts.
No, I absolutely love that, Elijah. And we'll get to the group thread here in a minute, but let's stay right here with building this community that you have around Crooked Media and around your podcast and the work that you're doing outside of that, those initiatives and the help that went into all the runoffs, the election, everything like that. There's one thing to ask your audience to do something, but unless they're a loyal audience that really believes and feels connected to the podcast or to the company, sometimes it's hard to get them to actually take that action. What was like the key, I guess, to building that loyal audience that when you say something, they'll listen and they'll go take action?
I mean, I think it really comes down to credibility and then knowing just how to like pull the right levers of government. So, I mean, we have our hosts and founders are incredibly talented people who aren't just good on mic, but they have experienced what Washington, D.C. is actually like and what passing laws is actually like. So they bring a lot of credibility when they say, here's what we actually need to do to get progressive legislation passed. You're going to listen to them. They know what it is, and they're not just advising some talking head on CNN to go out and do it. I think the appeal of the podcast is you're really getting the inside look. So playing on that credibility, and then our team behind the scenes also worked in politics in the White House. Tanya Somnader was the digital director for the Obama White House, and so she dreamt up this initiative, Vote Save America, basically saying, what do we wish we'd had in terms of support when we were in the White House, and what can we give to our audience? Now, in terms of actually engaging the audience, we came up with a tiered system, like a tiered level of engagement. So the entry level into the program is you just listen to the podcast or you interact with us on social media. I'd say like the middle tier is, you sign up for the website, maybe you give money to a race. And then there's a top tier of engagement, which we wanted to give people, which is something we called Adopt a State. So a lot of our audience is not necessarily in swing states. So we said, if you are concerned about the election, you want to get involved, here are ways that you can actually volunteer, not just give money. We had hundreds of thousands of people sign up. I think over 300,000 people sign up to go volunteer in different states all around the country just because they listen to the podcast. And I think it's a really interesting and unique, and I think something that will be replicated in the future approach to content, to say that you're not just a passive listener. You're not just a passive consumer in all of this content. These are things that you care about. You don't have to just sit at home and be mad. And we are not only going to inform you, we are going to give you the tools and the tiers to get involved.
I think that concept of not just being a passive listener, but being an active listener is something that's a huge takeaway for everybody listening, whether it's politics, sports, media, entertainment, whatever intersection you sit at. I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, the access to these personalities. You mentioned it earlier, group thread. This was something that, us at Tagboard, we were excited to, help you bring to life. And for people who don't know what group thread is, we've got a little video that we'll be able to roll so that people can check it out. But Elijah, while we're rolling this, maybe you can talk everybody through what was this group thread concept? How'd you guys come up with this?
Sure. So what we're looking at here was our Democratic National Convention coverage. We would go live with our hosts. They do a little bit of news coverage, but then the majority of what we would do is just play the DNC in one little corner of the screen, and then play our Slack thread of people just talking about what they were seeing. And how we came up with this was, how do you watch political events? How do you watch debates? You watch the DNC, what have you? You watch it on your couch, texting your friends or going on Twitter. What if you could just have access to the smart personalities that you're going to go listen to live in real time and just see them cracking jokes in the way that you're actually doing with your friends? And so that was something that was just made sense for us, also because it didn't make sense for, we saw a lot of people watching the debates and being on camera and commenting over it, but you want to watch the debates. You want to hear what they're saying. So we wanted to give people something that they could not have to have that viewing experience interrupted, and have this, I guess, even a more passive second screen experience. And it's something that we did for Trump's first impeachment, for all the Democratic debates, and that we're going to continue to do. And these things crushed for us. We did so much better in terms of concurrent viewers than many mainstream news outlets that were carrying the events themselves, or other commentators that had themselves in a box and box.
I like what you said there. It's like friends, watching friends or interacting with friends, interacting with your personalities, and you're just seeing it all take, action right in front of you in the Slack thread, in the group thread. How did you pull it off? Like, if someone was watching this and they're like, well, that's kind of cool. How did you pull that off to show, the group thread and everything like that?
Everything is very held together with paper clips and gum here. So, it's me in my house just with OBS screen capping our Slack thread in one window, and carrying the actual event through my laptop, exported to HDMI, just brought it all into OBS in the different windows. Our graphics team put together a little overlay. And of course, Tagboard, towards the end, the Democratic debates came in and gave us some live fact checking. So it's really 3 elements and a graphical overlay. So the Tagboard fact check, the event itself, and the Slack thread plus the graphics. Now, I will say there's a funny rights problem that we had early on with the debates. CNN, MSNBC, they're very tricky with rights. So when we didn't have rights for an event, we got weird and creative. It's one of the things you can do when you're at a little company like this. And we knew that people were tuning in to hear the personalities, but we wanted to give them something to look at. So we literally took cutouts, like cut them out with scissors of like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, put them on popsicle sticks, and had two interns hold them in front of a little stage. So, and just act out the debate in real time. We're talking tens of thousands of concurrents watching this alongside our commentary. And it's fun to get to try that stuff, and it's even better when it works.
Next time we do this, I'm making popsicle sticks of Sky and I, so that instead it should really just be our cutouts instead of our faces. Held together by paper clips. I've got a 60-foot cable run to my router that's in a way back bedroom. So, producing from home, we get creative, and I get that. Speaking of group thread, that was perfect for digital. In a pre-COVID world, Crooked did live shows as well. I know we've got some video as well from a show you guys did at Radio City Music Hall. So group thread versus this in-person show that you at home are looking at right now. Talk a little about what translates from in-person to digital and what just doesn't translate.
It's so funny because this was a huge part of this just before COVID. And obviously we had to stop in February. We had a whole slate of live shows planned for 2020. So that hurt us to lose, but kind of counterintuitively, it was good for us on the video and digital side because we were able to just really simplify and focus on what works, which is just consistency, gaming the algorithm on places like YouTube and in the podcast app, making sure our release dates were consistent. And the thing about these big live events is they simply don't translate to digital platforms. I mean, I've never had someone ask me to watch a conversation show, and there are so many, and I know networks try so hard to make them work, like Dave Letterman's show on Netflix, for instance. But no one ever says, you have to watch this conversation show. Look at this jib shot. Look at this background. It really does just come down to hearing the people that you find credible talking about the issues that you care about. And like I said, it's weird seeing something like Group Thread, which looks like it could have Minesweeper in it, just absolutely crushed because we just hit all the right little algorithm formulas right there, versus this fantastic show that we did at Radio City Music Hall, or the show I got behind me at the Greek Theater, just get respectable, a couple tens of thousands of views, but nothing groundbreaking.
Watching Favreau play Minesweeper, I'd tune into that. That's an electric experience right there. I could get down with that. Your flagship podcast, Pod Save America, it's constantly near the top of the charts. There's a lot of really good podcasts out there and that drive huge numbers, big engagement. I think something that not everyone does as well, though, as you do and the team at Crooked Media does, is taking that podcast and then promoting it across all your digital platforms, creating original content off of the podcast that's not even part of the podcast. What's the key to promoting a good podcast and building something like you did there with Pod Save America?
Oh, just like I said, just play the platforms. Don't try to drive to the podcast, or don't try to drive from the podcast. I try to tell people all the time, putting something, or how do I say this? Scrolling through Twitter and then seeing a link to a podcast is not a realistic conversion. I don't know anyone who's going to just be scrolling through news and say, I'm going to go listen to an hour and a half podcast right now. So don't think of it as a marketing tool for your podcast in terms of actual conversion. Just have the best Twitter presence possible. Have the best YouTube presence possible. Don't play that game, play the titling and SEO game. Make the thumbnails just the way they want you to make them. Change your titles. We use puns for all of our Pod Save America titles in feed. We just go through Brunt Force SEO, Trump and Biden did this today titles for YouTube, because it's tied into Google. You just have to play that game. So just recognizing what each platform's strengths are is how you grow your product. And then they all help grow each other just kind of through like soft brand engagement and just a constant presence in people's feeds.
It's huge. It's huge to think about it that way. And I think that's great advice. You go way back with our fellow guest coming up here next, Michael Buckland. We'll hear from him in just a minute. But he did note on a LinkedIn post recently, he said that you, Elijah, live in the year 2030, and you can give us a look at what the future looks like. So consider your secrets safe here with us. What do you see next in the digital media landscape? I know you guys are hard at work planning what comes next in 2021. What's on the forecast?
Man, I'm not sure. I see like a kind of like hollowing out of the middle of like the mid-sized firm, the mid-sized digital production firm. I mean, when you get to a scale like Buck works out at Fox, you're not going anywhere. And the thing that's really going to change, I think, is the rise of places, like Patreon and the ability of people to just make and produce their own content and support themselves. And I think that we saw it a little bit in like 2017, 2018 of these digital media outlets just get hammered by like a Facebook algorithm change. And I think that trend is going to continue as people realize more and more that the editing tools, as you're seeing on TikTok, and the production tools just become more accessible, that they can promote and create their own content without needing as many specialized people in the middle, both in terms of on the production side or on the distribution side. So I'd say a hollowing out of the content middle class, if I had to put it that way.
We ask all of the storytellers who join Storyteller the same question, and that's in 3 words. The best stories are blank, blank, and blank.
I would say personality driven, colorful, and I'll just say funny. I mean, I don't like anything more than just like a funny story.
And speaking of funny, how about that popsicle stick story? Just killed me. Creativity is clearly on a whole nother level with the Crooked Media team. Make sure you tweet at Elijah Cohn. It is literally at Elijah Cohn. Let him know you heard him here on Storyteller and really enjoyed his stories. Also, if you want a full recap of the 3-day Storyteller experience, we made sure to drop a link to that in the show notes. And of course, be sure catch us next week for quotes like this.
These interactive experiences are just a different way to enjoy a game. We think they're the future. There's no reason there should even be one interactive watch party for a live event. I see a future where there's different themes, different styles for different types of users, different platforms. But we've started with Joel Klatt, our college football analyst, in a conference room with his researcher, and they watched a college football playoff. And we looked up and we go, wow, we got 3 million views. People watching a person watch a game. That's pretty interesting.
Hopefully Michael Buckland, VP of Fox Sports Digital, brings some of those 3 million viewers/listeners to Storyteller next week. But for this week, that'll do it. Have a great day and an even better tomorrow.